Chapter 7. The Means for the Quest. The neem, gulmohar and other trees have shed their leaves, and in their place new tender leaves have started appearing, hinting at the change in nature. The parched and dry ground is covered by the dead leaves, which have totally surrendered to the blowing wind. The squirrels and birds running or hopping on the ground add to the rustling sound of the leaves. In the forest nearby, a few leopards are frolicking in a stream of cold water, dissipating the heat. The monkeys wait for them to vacate so as to follow suit. The whole atmosphere is filled with the sounds of cuckoos and other birds. It is the month of Chaitra, the first month of the Hindu calendar. Back in the village, the farmers are plowing their dry fields with the hope of a healthy monsoon, which has evaded them for the past 3 years. Most of them are engaged in the physical act mechanically, while their minds are involved in the act of brooding over the loss they have been incurring for the past 3 years and worrying about the possibility of yet another dry monsoon. This involvement with the past and future makes them totally oblivious of the harsh sun and the oppressive heat. Their children, helping them in their own playful way, are neither worried nor conscious of the discomfort of the April sun and heat. In the same village, a man sitting in the coolest room of his big house complains of the heat. The servants, ready to attend to his small wish, wonder as to why their master has suddenly started feeling the discomfort of the summer. How are they to know that he too has started experiencing a strange depression quite unknown to him? No doubt, the external heat has its contribution to his present condition, but he has really caught the virus of comparison, opinion, and competition. An aged couple living in the same village has not even noted the change in the weather as they are planning to welcome their son who is coming home on his annual leave. The parental affection and the concern in the old couple wants the son to take to married life. The mother has already planned how to receive her daughter-in-law, in spite of the fact they are yet to choose the bride for their son. Each of the dwellers in that village is occupied, or rather preoccupied, with his or her thought, with the consequent mood of elation or depression. Survival is no doubt an integral part of existence. The driving force of the instinct for survival goads all creatures, great and small, towards activity. Instinctively, the creatures learn whatever is necessary for survival, like the facts about food, shelter, and danger. A king cobra leaves her hole just before the hatching of her eggs, as she knows instinctively that being a snake eater herself, she may eat her own hatchlings. When the hatchlings come out, they are instinctively driven to their food, that is, the lesser snakes, and thus the story of survival continues without any formal training. It has been established beyond doubt that even the animals and birds have a semblance of thought. A newborn baby need not be taught to breathe, but through its cry, which has been called as the primeval cry by the psychologists, it starts breathing. When it is hungry, its cry tells its mother to feed it. Up to this point, man resembles other creatures. The child continues its quest for knowledge of the external world, the world as revealed by its senses. A newborn babe tries to understand this world. It asks, "What is this world that impinges on my sense organs every minute?" The baby is puzzled. It is unable to understand what it is, and yet it struggles to understand. Slowly it gets a grip on the world while trying to understand it. The child thus grows in knowledge of the external world. When this effort to understand the external world becomes organized and precise, it becomes science. The scientific approach has become thorough and nearly complete today. This makes the physical science a subject of profound respect for every lover of truth. The greatest contribution of the modern period is towards understanding the environment in which we live. This understanding is necessary if we want to improve our life. However, such thinking is dominated by the means and methods of survival like the food, fear, sleep and procreation. This trend in thinking continues in a more sophisticated way in most of the humanity. The characteristic feature of this thought is that it is very intimately connected with the material world perceptible to the senses. But is that all? In spite of the long strides, nay, leaps of progress in the scientific and technological field, there is no peace and fulfillment in man. Today, man has penetrated the atom and has succeeded in unleashing its energy for constructive as well as destructive purposes. But he has failed to control the energy of hatred for his fellow beings. He has unearthed the secret of life energy through his research in the field of genetics, but he has not been able to tap the power of love and compassion dwelling in each heart. Human problems cannot be solved by mere intellectual energy, especially when we see the spread of crime today. We find that some of the great criminals are great intellectuals. The world has enough intellectual power, but that intellect needs purification. The intellect must respect other individuals. We are aware how our exploitation of the other dominates over the other. Even in various scientific organizations, we come across this problem. The top scientists do not allow the juniors to grow, and they appropriate the research of the juniors as well as their own. The main problem is that in spite of the intellectual growth, there is practically no spiritual growth. We come across many highly educated persons breaking down under insignificant pressures. This is due to the fact that they have very high expectation from themselves as well as the society, or they are governed more by the public opinion than by the faith in themselves. Apparently, the intellect has been creating more problems in life than solving them. Main reason for this tragic consequence is that most of humanity has restrained its thought and observation only to the external dimension and has hardly bothered the internal dimension just because the external world is readily available to our five senses. The physical sciences base their understanding on the observable facts of the world by the senses. It has been conclusively proved that the senses by themselves are limited in their capacity to receive the external information. Eyes are sensitive to a narrow band of electromagnetic spectrum called the visible light. Ears are sensitive to the sound frequency called the audible frequency, and so on. In this sense, we are never aware of the whole external world. In recent years, especially the advances made in the high energy physics, have brought into light some startling facts that are not in tune with the conventional physics. Scientists are forced to include not only the observed but also the observer. Those who studied the organic evolution, however, had observed this datum earlier. The biologists and especially the neurologists came to recognize this profound datum. They observed that the living cell has awareness, which no external phenomena have. It is aware, but aware only of the external world, not itself. Such awareness is initially elementary, But as evolution proceeds, it becomes more intensified and more variegated, giving the organism greater control of the external environment. At the human level of evolution, this awareness develops a new focus, the awareness of the self or the observer. Any species that develops this awareness will dominate the world. We see human beings gaining more and more control each day in spite of their small size compared to huge animals because they have more awareness. Thousands of years ago, our sages recognized this inner dimension of the observer and discovered that this dimension is really a vast inner world of experience that is waiting to be studied and investigated. They too must have started the search externally, but they found the external world became more complicated and puzzling with each step taken outside. Instead, they turned their attention to the internal and, to their pleasant surprise, discovered the self, infinite, all-pervading, and unchanging. They discovered that man is a becoming, a process, that he is a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. The lower beings, including the primates, are instinctive and unconscious. In man, a major part of his being is unconscious, while a minor portion is conscious. In horizon, the sky apparently meets the earth, while in man, the subtle really meets the gross. He is not just a physical body, having a definite shape and size, but much more. The habit of dwelling only on the care and needs of the body has not brought him any fulfillment. On the contrary, it brings him tension, anxiety, and misery. Mahabharata says, Amritaschaiva mrityuscha dvayam dehe pratishthitam mrityurapadyate mohat satyenapadyate mritam. Both immortality and mortality are established in the body. By pursuing of delusion, one attains mortality, and by pursuing truth, one attains immortality. Mortality means the changing, the body, senses, mind, intellect, etc. It also means the feeling of discontent and a general anguish. One cannot but help observe death and impermanence in the world and in oneself. In the verse, the word delusion refers to going after the impermanent things. Presently, we are going through this phase of experience in spite of all the objects of comfort and luxury. There is neither peace nor is there any satisfaction. Shvetashvatara observes, Yada charmavat akasham veshtaishyanti manavaha tada devam avidnyaya dukkasyanto bhavishyati. Men may succeed in folding up the space like a piece of leather, yet they will not be able to eliminate misery without the experiential wisdom of the luminous divine. It does not mean, however, that one has to negate the external world, but one should not be obsessed by it at the cost of the inner. What are the means by which we can enter this wonderful inner dimension? The Rishis said that for both the dimension of search, man has the same means: body, senses, mind, speech, and the life energy or prana in the decreasing order of grossness or increasing order of subtlety. Taittiriya Upanishad not only describes such graded awareness developing in human beings, but also gives the methodology of achieving the awareness through a dialogue between the disciple and preceptor. Bhrigu approached his father Varuna in all humility with an appeal to instruct him in Brahman. Compassionately looking into the eyes of Bhrigu, his son, Varuna said, Annam pranam chakshushrotram manovachamiti tagumho vacha yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayantyabhisamvishanti tad vijitnyasasva tad brahmeti. Food, prana, eyes, ears, mind and speech are the doors to Brahman, from which all these things are born, having born in which they live, having lived in which they merge, know that to be Brahman. Through tapas, experience the Brahman. Having listened to the hints from his preceptor and father Varuna, Bhrigu retreated to a place and started contemplating on the hints. The principal awareness that develops in any life form is that of the body. For human beings also, it is the first step of awareness, and unfortunately many a time it remains as the last. The body is mandatory, means in the quest for truth, both external as well as internal. Without it, the other instruments cannot manifest. J. Krishnamurti used to say that body is like a horse for a cavalier, which is mandatory for him. The body has been called as Annamaya Kosha or food sheath, as it is totally dependent on the food for its existence. The food as such is elemental, and Bhrigu observed that the body is born in and has come from food. It lives due to food, and when it dies, it again merges into food through the elements. He felt that Annam or food fulfills the characteristics laid down by his teacher for Brahman. The Upanishad continues. Annam brahmeti vyajanat annadhyeva khalvimani bhutani jayante annena jatani jivanti annam prayantyabhisamvishanti tadvidnyaya punareva varunam pitaramupasasara adhihi bhagavo brahmeti tagumho vacha tapasa brahma vijitnyasasva tapo brahmeti satapo tapyata satapastaptva. He realized Annam as Brahman, for it is verily from food that all these beings take birth. On food they subsist after being born, and they move towards and merge into food. Having realized that, he again approached his father Varuna and prayed, O revered sir, teach me Brahman. To him Varuna said, aspire to know Brahman through tapas. Tapas is Brahman. He practiced tapas, having performed tapas. In fact, this Upanishad gives the traditional Gurukul way of learning. Nothing was spoon-fed. Certain hints were given by the teacher, giving all the characteristics, coming to his level. And having absorbed those hints through listening, he would retreat or into a small place where he would try to do contemplation and perhaps meditation which was taught to him. This is a wonderful way in developing the thought as such, which unfortunately the present education cannot give, because it only gives information which is to be remembered by the child. Anyway, Bhrigu realized that the body is the link between the inner and the outer. It is through the vehicle of body that the human beings start their pilgrimage. Body learns through its contact with the external world. During such contact with the external world, it experiences the pairs of opposites like pleasure and pain. The external objects come in contact with the senses, which are parts of the gross body. The senses are meant and designed as such to collect the sense stimuli from the external world. Food alone cannot possibly help in this process of making the senses active. When he peeped within, he discovered that behind the body and senses there is an activity, and this activity is dependent on prana, or the life force, which gets generated through food, no doubt, but is much subtler than it. In fact, even the tapas is not possible without the prana. He once again approached Varuna to disclose his discovery and said, Prano brahmeti vyajanat pranadhyeva khalvimani bhutani jayante pranena jatani jivanti pranam prayantyabhisamvishanti tadvidnyaya punareva varunam pitaramupasasara adhihi bhagavo brahmeti tagum hovacha tapasa brahma vijitnyasasva tapo brahmeti satapo tapyata satapastaptva. He knew prana as Brahman, for from the prana indeed spring all these beings. Having come into being, they live through the prana. They move towards and enter into prana. Having realized that, he again approached his father Varuna and prayed, O revered sir, teach me Brahman. To him, Varuna said again, aspire to know Brahman through tapas. Tapas is Brahman. He practiced tapas, having performed tapas. The statement that tapas is Brahman is again repeated. It gives a hint that Bhrigu's discovery was not incorrect, but incomplete. So he withdrew and once again plunged into himself. All the activity would be of no avail if there was no mind. In animals too, there is the body and prana, but they remain animals and die as animals. But we have something else. How can we be sure of the faculty which is subtler than prana? Our own experience points out certain great truths we fail to perceive if the mind is not associated with the senses. The association, however, depends on the likes and dislikes or the priorities kept by oneself. If a hungry man goes to a market, he notices only the eating places, or a bibliophile only the bookshops. If it was not so, then life would have been more disturbing than ever, as it is said that senses are exposed to thousands of stimuli every minute. The mind thus rejects most of the sense stimuli by being selective. The function of selection and rejection of the sense data has been called by the Vedanta as manas, which is an important function of the mind. It appears as though that this function is a major portion of the animalistic or uncultured mind. In animals which are gifted with keen instinct, this function is not sufficient for survival without the help of memory or the function of recollection. By remembering, the animal can avoid certain dangers and seek food or safe shelter by making its life easy. The function of remembering has been called as chittam. For animals, the primary aim and concern is survival, but human beings, it is much more than survival. Bhrigu was happy with this discovery and reported it to the preceptor. Mano brahmeti vyajanat manaso hyeva khalvimani bhutani jayante manasa jatani jivanti manah prayantyabhisham vitantiti tadvidnyaya punareva varunam pitaramupasasara adhihi bhagavo brahmeti tagum hovacha tapasa brahma vijitnyasasva tapo brahmeti satapo tapyata satapastaptva. He discovered Manas to be Brahman. For from Manas indeed spring all these beings. Having been born, they are sustained by the Manas, and they move towards and merge into Manas. Having realized that, he again approached his father Varuna and prayed, O revered sir, teach me Brahman. To him Varuna said, aspire to know Brahman through tapas. Tapas is Brahman. He practiced tapas, having performed tapas. When Varuna repeated his statement, Bhrigu knew that he was still far from the truth. He retreated and started his contemplation. Manas and Chittam by themselves cannot be enough for human life. If we study the history of evolution, we find that the species called as the Homo sapiens tried to change the external nature through the discovery of the fire, invention of tools and the wheel to reach the present age of space travel. The effort to change the external nature began with another function of the mind called as the buddhi in Vedanta, which may be roughly translated as the reason. This function consists of analysis and decision. The facet of reason is one of the most important means used by the Vedanta to transcend the indulgence with the body and senses and involvement with the activity of mind. Taittiriya Upanishad calls this facet as Vijnanam. It continues, Vijnanam brahmeti vyajanat Vijnanadhyeva khalvimani bhutani jayante Vijnanena jatani jivanti Vijnanam prayantyavisamvishanti tad vijnaya punareva varunam pitaramupasasara adhihi bhagavo brahmeti tagumhovacha tapasa brahma vijidnyasasva tapo brahmeti satapo tapyata satapastaptva. He realized Vijnanam as Brahman, for from Vijnanam indeed spring all these beings. Having been born, they are sustained by Vijnanam. They move towards and merge in Vijnanam. Having known that, he approached his father Varuna once again with an appeal, O revered sir, teach me Brahman. To him Varuna repeated, aspire to know Brahman through tapas. Tapas is Brahman. He practiced tapas, having performed tapas. Having entered the field of Vijnanam or Buddhi or reason, it becomes very difficult to transcend it. Reason, no doubt, helps in transcending the grosser manifestations like body, senses and manas. But reason itself is obstinate, as it is one of the subtlest links that connects the external with the internal. Reason is the distinguishing factor between the animal and man. There is a higher facet to Vijnanam than reason, that is, awareness. When one understands this aspect, one easily sees that the awareness is the linking factor among all the sheaths, as we are aware of the body, prana, manas as well as buddhi. Even this awareness is in the field of duality, as there is the sheath and the one who is aware. So, to transcend the duality, to enter totality, Varuna repeats a few sentences. First one is that Brahman should be cognized by tapas. Normally tapas is taken as austerity or penance, but in the present context, tapas acquires a new significance. In an earlier essay, we had referred to the definition of Acharya Shankara when he observes tapas to be quietening of the external and the internal faculties. With the quietude, for which he uses the word samadhanam. One acquires the power to distance oneself from the faculties. Once this distance develops, one comes out of the constriction created by the involvement in the particular faculty. Thus, the involvement with the body and senses is the grossest, which is usually called as indulgence, and buddhi and prana are subtler. That is how tapas can also be interpreted as non-involvement. Interpreting it this way, we can understand the next statement of Varuna, tapas is Brahman, which is oft repeated. At the subtlest level, tapas only means distancing oneself from one's faculties. When one has distanced oneself from body, senses, manas and buddhi, one enters into the inexpressible plane of ananda or bliss. With this experiential wisdom ends the dialogue between Bhrigu and Varuna. The Upanishad continues, Anando brahmeti vyajanat anandadhyeva kalvimani bhutani jayante anandena jatani jivanti anandam prayantyabhisamvishanti saisha bhargavi varuni vidya parame vyoman pratisthita saya evam veda pratitishthati. He knew bliss as Brahman. From bliss, indeed, all these beings originate. Having been born, they are sustained by bliss. They move towards and merge in bliss. This wisdom, realized by Bhrigu and imparted by Varuna, terminates in the Supreme, established in the cavity of the heart. It is understandable that Bhrigu did not go to his father teacher again, for there were no more doubts, as all the doubts emanate from buddhi, and he had transcended it. There is a very beautiful verse in Bhagavad Gita. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manah manasastu para buddhehe yo buddhehe parasastu saha. Senses are subtler than body. Manas is subtler than the senses. Buddhi is subtler than manas. Subtler than buddhi is he. The subtler faculty has control over the grosser one. The manas being subtler than the senses, it can control them. So, he, that is the transcendental reality, which has been referred to as Ananda or bliss, controls buddhi, which is an integral nature of reality. Thus, the Taittiriya Upanishad gives a method of nididhyasana or introspective contemplation by making use of the very faculties used by the science for the external search. With body as a means, asanas help us to learn the art of non-involved observation of the body. With the breathing as a means, pranayama helps us observe the prana. Dhyana uses the observation of the mind. In these methods, principally, grosser activity and effort is reduced so as to identify oneself with this subtler medium. This process has been called as upasamharam or withdrawal. Like the heat of the summer forcing animals and men to withdraw into the cooler places, the external disturbances forces us to make a change in the activity. But it is our experience that the change does not in any way reduce the disturbance, but only suppresses it. This is due to the fact that most of us take them to be ends in themselves and get identified with them. Instead of changing the activity or involvement, the Upanishads suggest that one should learn to observe the activity as an uninvolved witness. This attitude helps the seeker to transcend the pain-giving grosser planes and to realize that all activity at all the levels of body, prana, manas and buddhi are nothing but the means for the quest. Our culture in general and the Upanishads in particular firmly declare that there is nothing inimical in existence. Everything in existence is of great value to it. As in the ultimate experience, everything is not only one but identical. It is not other. The apparent multiplicity only adds fun and color to its play. This is one of the greatest truths ever uttered by humanity. For then it follows that everything can and does aid the seeker in being that non-duality or no otherness.